Hey guys, Akariss here, bringing you another Fire Emblem Heroes video. Today's video is, well, pretty big in requests because I've been MIA for a full month. So if you didn't already guess by the title or the thumbnail, I'm going to talk about everything I didn't talk about in this past month. And it's going to be quite a lot to go through. This isn't going to be as detailed as some of the other videos, so feel free to sit back and skip ahead, as there will be chapters below to take you to whatever section you think is most interesting for you. If not, just feel free to watch the whole thing. That always helps out the YouTube algorithms, along with also turning that thumbs up button over there into a very shiny blue. That's always appreciated, folks, and sub if you haven't already. So let's jump into this. As a quick mention, if you want to support what I do, or you want to see more of me, then maybe check out the coaching links or the Patreon in the description below. I'm also on Twitch every single day. With that being said, first up, I'm going to talk about the April update, not the May update, which is coming up. That will likely be another video, but the April update is the first thing we'll cover here. I'm just going to touch on some of the key notes here, key factors, things that maybe you've already kind of figured out, or maybe you haven't, or at least understand what my thoughts on all this is. So yeah, let's talk about April to begin, and with all the other banners and updates that we had throughout this month. Starting with the whole Arena Assault Plus update. This is a great addition to the game because it just adds more rewards and also makes that mode easier to handle. There is the extra flowers associated with it, and you have 2 additional retries, which makes it much more friendlier to engage into and just play overall. Arena and Arena Assault has become a bit harder, I'd say, for most players, just because there's just more problematic units there, such as Dual Dogger or Dual Crom, and having this retry feature plus the additional rewards is always nice. Among that, there's also arena changes, which is now the arena bonus units that aren't the banner units. So, for example, Duo Ike's Banner is still going to be like a bi-weekly change on the bonus heroes. But everything else that isn't the banner units is now cycled out on a weekly basis. This, in my opinion, is a good thing because it means that certain, let's say, legendary heroes such as Dimitri or Byleth or Crom or whatever don't get like 2 seasons to completely dominate the score thresholds requiring Arena to promote or stay in those tiers. I think overall this should result in a lower cutoff needed for these bonus units, like just Arena seasons in general. And it does unfortunately require a bigger resource investment if you're trying to keep up though, but as you do have to build more arena bonuses or potentially pull for more units. But overall this means that stuff like Cordelia or Noe or Nino might finally end up being arena bonuses even after 5 years since this game came out. Moving on, we do have the Hex Trap. So the Hex Trap is an addition to Ether Raids that was made available here in April. The funny part about this trap is that Disarm Trap doesn't work, and I've always thought that was kind of weird. But the trap does have its own set of counterplay and advantages. I do think using it on defense is generally better than Bolt Trap. However, of course, with the addition of Medusa and his On Guard effect, technically there's some use out of Bolt Trap too now because Bolt Trap doesn't hit your defense team anymore. Regardless, I would still opt for most people to be using Hex Trap on defense because it is great against a lot of problematic units that might otherwise be hitting your defense, such as Yuri, who doesn't easily hit 55 HP when the Hex Trap is max upgraded, and other mythics just do not, like all mythics, do not hit 55 HP, so you can really use it to defend your team, usually in something like melee range. So mythics like Regan cannot go in and can't go out, or let's say a range unit like Air or Ashera cannot effectively snipe your team as easily because if you use a Hex Trap to protect from 2 spaces away, you're always going to hit those units. It doesn't hit like tanks, it doesn't really hit higher HP range units, but it does hit a lot of good units, and it does have some synergy with Bolt Trap at least, because if a Bolt Trap lowers the HP of other units, then Hex Trap can lock those units. Another thing I want to mention is smiting onto the Hex Trap doesn't work. So if you are protecting, let's say, your front line with a Hex Trap, and you're trying to like smite Regan onto the Hex Trap to deactivate it, that doesn't work. the Hex Trap actually turns off the unit even if it can still move. So in general, I feel this trap is pretty good, and if it does get any further upgrades in the future with higher HP thresholds, it will be a force to be reckoned with. Alright, next up is the Ephemeras and Weapon Refines. So again, I'm not going to be doing like builds or extensive analysis on all this that I normally do. You can look forward to that in the upcoming future videos. I'm just going to briefly give my thoughts on all this, starting with the Ephemeras. So this does set a precedent with the 4-star focus Marth here, that I think they're going to start giving us 4-star focuses as 5-star Ephemeras going forward, with the next one maybe being something like Raphael. I think this is both a good and a bad thing. The good thing is that a lot of these seasonal units did end up having good fodder in the long term. Notably, I remember getting stuff like Special Fighter or Winter Rapier from Winter Manuela, and there's other stuff like Special Spiral, I believe, from Ninja Male Corin. And we're not really going to reach them yet, but I'm saying like eventually the fodder does end up being pretty good, so it's not lacking in fodder either. And yeah, so don't be, it's a good and a bad thing, because obviously there could be better units and better fodder, but it's not necessarily bad either. Another thing here is Felicia. So Felicia being a free ephemera is pretty good if you did end up forming her from months ago from the Fates Hall of Forms, and this is just a great way to add a merge if you did end up redeeming her there. If I had known about this, then I probably would have opted to redeem her months ago. Unfortunately, it's not very easy. It could have been Flora, for example, here. There was not really much way of knowing whether it was going to be Felicia or Flora, but otherwise it is a good pickup, and I think she has Special Fighter, so at the very least it's good fodder for most of you. The rest, we have Fury Fodder and Spider Plush, or I guess Sophia Merge for some of you. Let's talk about the Weapon Refines though. So for the Weapon Refines from this batch, my clear winner here was actually Yogurt, which I think wasn't talked about as much from what I could tell from my community and whatnot. I think that Yogurt is the strongest from this batch because Yogurt has a great, like an aura effect. If you've ever used Hinoka and Save Balls, then you'll know what I'm talking about. Hinoka, Warrior Princess, where her bow is able to give this like great daunt effect, attack speed, defense minus and whatnot. She has like drive attack in her weapon. Yogurt is really good because she's flexible and can give quite a lot of boost to your team's power overall. If you're combining her with something like Legendary Azura, 7 to all stats, can effectively 7 minus all stats on the enemy team. It can be even further enhanced if you go full debuffs. So using like Sudden Panic with Sabotages, you can really create these drastic stat swings, and Yogurt is great because of that when set up properly. So she has become one of the best support units in the game. I unfortunately don't have her, but if I did, she's great to add on to Save Balls. The other notable refines here that I would mention is that Veronica is pretty good as a nuker now, but the whole orders effect that she gives isn't all that appealing because there's just someone who just does it better, and well, that's Bridal Catria, obviously. So yeah, Veronica's mobility bonus is nice, but there is someone who's a green unit that kind of does it better. However, she is much better as a nuker. Additionally, we have Tiburn and Versa here. So Versa just became a much better combat unit, and after playing against her, I can respect how much more powerful she is. If you were an Versa user before her refine, you are definitely happy with how she performs, especially in combat post-refine. And with Tiburn, one thing that I think isn't really acknowledged is his refine isn't necessarily player phase only. It can be used on enemy phase, and I believe it's like a special fighter effect, so he's going to be quite good even as a tank if you wanted to use him that way. I'm not even going to mention Selkie because I don't even remember what that refine did, so sorry Selkie fans, I have nothing to say. Finally, next up is the Tempest Trials, and with that we ended up getting more Infantry Pulse fodder. So Infantry Pulse fodder is something that I honestly didn't expect that we would get, because I felt like Marissa was a mistake from years back when, like, that they didn't want to give us this fodder anymore, but apparently they do. So for those of you that were looking for more IP, Boyd is here and he does provide that. The seals that came out of this Tempest Trials are not that important. Defense Opening and Warding Breath or whatever. I guess it's an additional Breath Seal, which you could use in something like Summoner Duels, where you're kind of restricted on how many seals you have available. But generally speaking, these seals are not that interesting, and Boyd himself as a unit is too gimmicky for me to really recommend as a good unit. Unfortunately, that whole odd, even type mechanic is not that good, and I've never been a fan of wave skills in general. If anything, maybe he can be used on air offense as some sort of vantage unit on every odd turn. At least it's immersive to the gameplay experience, where he has a great up and down on his biorhythm and hit rates and whatnot. Wasn't a huge fan of that mechanic, but it is immersive. The banner that came with Boyd and the Tempest Trials, of course, was the Duo Ike banner, along with Soren and Ileana and Mia. So the most impactful thing here is obviously Duo Ike, and I wanted to mention that obviously these banners are designed now, I feel, with Summoner Duels in mind. Duo Ike was a great addition to the Summoner Duels meta to be used. He's great as a duelist, he's great as a very strong tanky type unit, but his duelist skill absolutely demolishes hardy fighter type tanks, which you're going to see all the time in Summoner Duels. So this does mean that Duo Ike was a great addition to that meta. And I feel they're going to continue doing this in every single seasonal banner. They're just going to keep releasing these dual heroes with these very strong effects to shape the meta. So you can see we had like Dual Dogger into Dual Crom and now into Dual Ike, and even Harmo Sonia and Harmo Azura were all quite impactful, all for that meta. I don't recommend chasing that meta. Don't recommend dumping your resources trying to beat all the players in Summoner Duels. That isn't needed. I don't have Dual Ike. I did end up with Dogger and Crom, but now with like Canto Control and Medusa, I have to adapt my strategies and try to overcome the odds in something like Summoner Duels. And I'm still able to get front page. Literally, I think I ranked 30 out of however many people play Summoner Duels in the world, completely F2P. My account doesn't have anything, not even Fed Pass. So you don't have to feel compelled to chase every single banner and every single new unit to rank well. You just gotta prepare, practice, and execute. With a bit of diligence and some luck, maybe, you can overcome some bad odds and rank pretty well. And honestly, if you don't, the reward gaps between somebody who's like top 1,000 and somebody's top 10,000 isn't even that much. It's like 10 or 15% difference. So you don't have to like go out of your way to be overly competitive. You'll still get a lot out of it. Either way, Duo Ike is a great carry type unit. And of course, a crazy good addition to Summoner Duels if you have him. The other units on this banner are pretty forgettable already. I kind of forgot what they do. I think Mia is a good duelist because she has like no follow-up and damage reduction and just pretty fast and strong unit. Soren and Ileana, I pretty much remember them having some sort of like wind sweep or DR effects based on res, I think, and whatever. They're not gonna be too great. I think maybe an air defense is like on a Catria ball is the best place to use them. Okay, next up we had the Resplendent Lachesis. I'm just gonna call her Cheese. So now it's Sarah happening before Cheese. It's kind of weird because I feel like these are like filler Resplendents. If they're not going to give weapon refines to healers, then these Resplendents are kind of a slap in the face for anyone who is a Fed Pass subscriber, especially if you're trying to make use of, let's say, the Spark system or the Summoner supports or any of the other benefits. This is like a dead Resplendent that has no fodder. It's not really useful in any game mode. And the only people that are going to appreciate this are pretty much fans of the character, which is unfortunate. So there's better options for people to be getting as Resplendent characters. And I guess it's what I think of it as now is they have to be filler in between better Resplendent options. Or maybe one day there will actually be a healer refine. There's no build or no purpose that I could honestly recommend or push for with a character like this. So I'm sorry that it did happen for those of you that are Fed Pass subscribers. Not me, but I do feel for you. Quick overview of the schedule and calendar here is the things to expect would be the upcoming Fallen Heroes banner. Now, if you look at the beginning of May, we have a new Heroes banner, and at the beginning of this month, we have a special Heroes banner. So what this tells me is that we're likely going to get our Fallen Heroes banner, which will not have a 4-star focus, and will probably be very impactful if you consider how good Fallen Edelgard was and still continues to be. So if you're trying to save orbs or thinking about something that's going to be meta changing, then the Fallen Heroes coming up will likely be that. Okay, next up was the middle of the month's Ascended Hero, which ended up being Ishtar. Now at this moment, I don't feel like Ishtar was too important and continued to not really be that important. The thing with Ishtar is, despite her having like a null guard effect and a brave weapon, she's not really too great because she's still going to be weak to damage reduction type effects. So that means like the Fallen Nettle guards or the Hardy fighters or the or I guess res based stuff like Medusa, she's not going to be able to chunk through those type effects because she doesn't have damage piercing. If in the future we get some sort of special that is inheritable to tomes, especially if it's like 2 charge or maybe 3 charge, then she's going to be much better because of the brave and that damage piercing. She's going to be great. She doesn't get the advantage of stuff like Kanto or Trace, and that kind of just makes her a little bit weaker than some other options that you could be using. However, of course, with Kanto being nerfed because of Kanto control, that does mean that these nukers that can just like go in and sit in position could be better. So maybe Ishtar is already a little bit better in that respect. The only notable other character here is Tine, Tyne, whatever. She's really strong because she has special acceleration, and it happens on a turn basis as long as she's 100% health. I think that both Ishtar and Tyne are actually quite good in something like an air defense Catria wall team, and Tyne could be really good for something like summoner duels where you're going to kind of like stall or control the match for a future turn, and even if you don't, then you're just going to have like these really strong specials just completely demolishing your enemy team. Other than that, there's not really much more to say. With the release of that banner, we also had Hilda here, and Hilda is another GHB red tome, but at least she had a preference weapon, which can be fairly interesting. She comes with a self buff on dominance as long as she's within 4 spaces of someone, debuffs the foes on attack and res, and amplifies her damage. She can hit pretty hard, and I can potentially see her being used in strategies that involve supporting or potentially tanking, maybe Vantage as well to take advantage of her high attack stat, but realistically not that impactful, and probably quite a hated character on top of that if you know the lore behind this one. Pretty forgettable overall. Okay, so as of this video, these Hero Fests are still happening, and they were a part of Golden Week. Sorry for those of you that were expecting a Fed channel, that is unfortunately not the result this year. But the Hero Fests were interesting because as every single year we get these returns, and it's a great way to add merges to these favorite characters of yours. If you're going to be summoning for CYL, if you're going to be summoning for the upcoming CYL 6, you should just wait a year from now and wait till they come back on these Hero Fests. Anyone who wanted to merge up their Erica's, Gatekeepers, Mart's, Marianne's, and even from last year, Edelgard, Claude, Lysithea, and Dimitri, this is the place to do it. If you haven't already spent all your orbs here to merge up these characters, it's probably one of those times to do so. I don't have anything in particular for myself, but I'm sure many of you have taken full advantage of these Hero Fests and their great rates. One other thing that also is to keep in mind is that the Fed Pass is applicable to these Hero Fests. So this is new as of this year, is now you can actually get these characters and then add an additional merge through just going for those summons anyways. But yeah, feel free to let me know in the comments below how your Hero Fest experience has been. Next up is a Resplendent with actual fodder. Quite a forgettable unit, which is Saber, but at least he has good fodder, and Shield Pulse is quite good on melee infantry tanks. Could potentially be good on ranged infantry tanks, but definitely melee. I've seen Shield Pulse used quite a bit on stuff like Ashe with Pavis in potentially summoner duels, but it can be used on any frontliner tank, melee tank, to kind of replicate a hardy fighter strategy. And if you don't have hardy fighter, you can literally just use Shield Pulse as like the budget hardy fighter option, and it works. It's not as great, but it still works pretty well. So compared to at least Cheese as Resplendent, at least we have Saber here that has some fodder to bring. As a unit himself, there's nothing really notable to mention here. He does have an interesting weapon in Refine, but he's too rare to think that most people will make the best use out of him. Final thing I want to talk about is the holoforms. I've already gone through the holoforms myself, but I do think that this batch of holoforms is quite interesting. So in this one we had Catria, Rudolf, Rinea, and Python, and I think that every single one of these formal options could be made a case for. Now, to go by them one by one and to even explain what I'm doing, just to maybe give you guys some perspective, here is my Rinea, and I did actually recently pick up Ruptured Sky as of yesterday to stream, so my Rinea is pretty much complete. Rinea is something I'm going to redeem myself, and the reason for that is because I think she's a great addition to AR defense and potentially summoner duels. So if you go for summoner duels, then you're going to want something like Sudden Panic or even Pulse Time. But if you use her on AR defense, I think that she's a great nuker / dancer for something like a Catria ball. So I ended up doing some simulations on Rinea, and Rinea is with an attack speed unity build and like a lull, and of course using Ruptured Sky with something like Love Bouquet or Spooky Sensor, you can chunk a lot of great tanks, including someone like Vector. She doesn't outright kill these tanks, but having a dancer who can not only dance or contribute to damage is great, and especially in Catria Ball, where those team compositions are weak to hidden runs or PvE type strategies where the units die and the enemy retreats, which is effectively hidden run but more or less sniping. Having a dancer or a nuker means that, and this is why Chrom or Lucina, Legendary Lucina, is so good on these teams, is that you can reach and punish the players who don't hit and run effectively, and Rinea adds to this type of strategy. So I'm going to be enhancing my own Catria Ball because of Rinea, and I'm glad to add her to the team. But yeah, next up is Python. So I might also be formatting Python, and the reason for this one is because Python, and actually all of this holoforms, benefits from Bridal Catria synergy. Now hear me out, Bridal Catria is from Valentia, and this means that she has natural synergy with Harmo, with her Harmo scale and this whole Hall of Forms. This means that you can effectively give an auto double to any of these units and a desperation effect. This is crazy good in something like Summoner Duels. So if you use Python with like Far Trace or potentially Ninja Yumi or something else, then you can really take full advantage of the power of these units and the Harmo skill that someone like Catria has. And Catria is already really good in Summoner Duels, so of course if you combine that with Python, or Rinea, or Rudolf, or even Catria maybe post-refine, that's all going to be great. So this build here is, again, something I've just built in the holoforms myself, but I would replace stuff potentially like Pulse Smoke for Joint Drive Attack, or Attack Speed Catch replaced with like Attack Speed Unity, or you could use something rare like a Springy Bow as well. Finally, Ruptured Sky would be an addition I could make here, and I do think that he's great as a potential candidate in Summoner Duels, because most of the tanks are tanking against magical nukes, deflect magic. So using something like Python against like Vector or Ascended Dune could be really great, because they're running deflect magic, they're trying to reduce and minimize the magical damage, but they don't have to worry about that. Like someone like Python doesn't have to care about any of that because he hits physical damage, and he has the color advantage, and he synergizes with Catria. So that's great. Rudolf is an interesting pickup. Also, I forgot to mention, Python is going to be due for refine soon, and so is Catria and Rudolf. So you can also make the case that any of these are worth picking up for future refines, if you have tons of Forma souls to work with, of course. Okay. Finally, with Rudolf and Catria, I do think that's a bit more risky, but if you needed, let's say, a far save edition or a near save edition, then Rudolf could be a decent pickup, especially picking up Hardy Fighter and the save skills and all these other premium skills for free. And let's say Curtains, Rudolf can make a case to be picked up as a Forma. But beyond that, it is a bit risky because we don't know how the future refine will end up being, and he is completely outclassed, unfortunately, by Brave Hector and Ascended Dune. So I'm going to be skipping this one, but I could see why you might want them. Feel free to let me know in the comments below if you're picking up any of these formas and why they're interesting to you, or maybe just any notes I might have missed, because again, I'm going through so many things here. So yeah, Catria is an interesting point as well, because she is the sister to Palla, and if you know Valentia Palla, she has Canto too. Now, if I'm just going to use that as like my basis for a future prediction, then I would say that Valentia Catria may very well end up with a refine that also has Canto, just to mimic her sister's effectiveness. Her weapon is already pretty decent, even by today's standards and before we have that refine, so I could see her being really good post-refines. But at this time, she's not very viable, and you really are just banking on a future refine. As a Catria fan, then this could end up being pretty good for you. Okay guys, that basically covers everything in this April update and everything I've missed this past month. So hopefully you took a lot out of this, and if you made it all the way to the end of this video, then I really do appreciate you for going through all that with me. If you feel I missed something or want to add to any of it, just say it in the comments. If you want to just say something in the comments anyways, that always helps out the algos. If you haven't liked already, go ahead and do that. And yeah, I will be covering some of the future updates very soon. Love you all, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.